Hey guys, sorry I got on here a couple minutes late here, just trying to figure out how this all works, but really excited to pop on. Hope that you guys started building based on our other video. When I took my other video before with Sean from Fantasy Alarm, we had a little bit of issue with the salaries with the game being switched. Navi and Vitality have now been added to the slate. So they took down all the salaries, redid them. When you add players like Simple and Zaiwu to the slate, it just naturally suppresses the prices of all the other players. So that's what we did see. We saw Nico go from over 10,000 now down to I think 8,800 we have here. So I'm going to kind of review the odds here quick. I'm going to go over some of my favorite cash plays, some of my favorite GPP stacks. Then we can go through any other questions you guys have. And it can be CSGO related. It can also be, we can make it DFS related. If you just have questions and you just want to know something about the process, maybe something that we are doing here at FSI or my style personally, just feel free to reach out and send questions there in the chat. So I am just going to get this posted. All right, so let's go over the odds here first. Navi coming in at a minus 145 favorite against Vitality. We know that this game was originally scheduled, I think, for Saturday, but now I think with MERS issues on the server, Spirit was kind of given the leeway to, I don't know if they switched their games or what they talked about, but the Spirit game off the slate, Spirit and Godsent. So now we had Simple and Zaiwu. This is two of the most exciting players to watch play CSGO. Unfortunately, it is the earliest game of the slate, so if you're not awake, you're not going to get to see that masterpiece, but it will be a fun back and forth between those two. So Navi coming in as a minus 145 favorite against Vitality. We will talk a little bit about kind of how they tend to carry their teams and if there's a couple other viable options on their team. FaZe, minus 135 favorite against Fnatic. That seems to be a pretty tight game. Could be a lot of DFS friendly atmosphere for the players. So we'll kind of talk about some of the players that I think are a little overpriced and maybe some of them that can find your way into a cash build or a GPP stack. How's it going, Zeke, sir? Thanks for the shout out. The last afternoon game, the North American game, we have Evil Geniuses up against Gen G. Evil Geniuses now, I have them listed at a minus 170 favorite, which is a movement definitely towards Evil Geniuses where I had them at minus 155 this afternoon. So I think that there is definitely merit to that. And I think part of that probably came off of Gen G just kind of getting beat up pretty bad by 100 Thieves today. If you watch the match, I think in round 28, Gen G had a 5-on-2 advantage, and 100 Thieves stole that map. And then J Keem had like a 1v3 clutch in the 29th round, and then they ended up winning 16-14. And then after that, in the second map, it wasn't really all that close. So I do think Gen G's odds are suppressed a little bit to the public just based on their performance today against 100 Thieves. And I think that's reasonable. I don't think that doesn't mean that you shouldn't take that into consideration, that they didn't play very well today. But also remember, Evil Geniuses didn't play very well against C9 either. So let's talk about some of the cash plays that I am looking at targeting. We'll kind of start from the top here. Simple and Zaiwu. Simple is somebody that I would consider here for cash. If you feel like the build is sufficient enough around it that you're not punting too much. I know I've got into the habit sometimes where I feel like I am playing Nico because I feel like there's enough value. And then he scores 60 points and he's 8 or 9 or 10,000, and then it's not worth it. I do think Simple's floor is higher and obviously has the same ceiling. So I think he probably, for me, projects you know, 10 to 15 points higher than the next closest person if we're taking most median outcomes here for someone like Simple. So I certainly think he's in play. Just make sure that make sure it works with the rest of your build. Zaiwu, I will leave for GPP. Being an underdog here, I'm not as intrigued to have him sandwiched in between Nico and Simple's price tags. I like those two better than Zaiwu, just based on that. And Zaiwu's floor hasn't really been that high. And if you watch their games recently, at least, it seems like depending on the map pick, he can be a little less aggressive, and he obviously has the talent to come up with the clutch plays, the 1v3, the 4 kills, the ace, those types of things. But he really needs those things to push him over to that 80, 90, 100 point edge, where Simple seems to be able to do that pretty easily without all that extra stuff. But Nico, the next guy on my cash target list at 8,800, they are a slight favorite. But I think that price tag coming down into the 8,000 range makes him a lot more popular. We do know his talent level. He grades out as one of the best phase players on basically every map they play. Likely we'll get Dust 2 again tomorrow. So I think, and we all know Dust 2 is one of his favorite maps with the AWP and the pistols. So my next target, I'm going to skip past Fnatic for now and talk about them a little bit later in the GPP side. But EG, Evil Geniuses, we have Breeze and Cirque. Breeze at 8,200, I think, will be pretty popular as he was a couple days ago. I think he was 8,600 in a similar favorite spot against C9. Obviously, it didn't necessarily pan out. Cirque did definitely meet that price tag. I think he had 70 points in that 3-map loss. But I do like Breeze and Cirque for cash games, being on that favorite side. And I think Genji's form today is really hard to ignore. I know I'm not trying to take one day and move on from that, but I think this is a spot that EG could definitely look to rebound. Then we go down to a couple other phase players I like on this slate. Brokey at 7,600. We saw his price tag at 9,000 today. Obviously, it's a smaller favorite. It's going to be a closer game, but I do think Brokey at 7,600 is a very cash viable play, along with Coldzera at 7,000. The difference between the two of them isn't that big, so it kind of determined based on price tag and your salaries. The $600 is a pretty significant difference between those two. Moving down to some of my other cash plays here, we talked about Cirque. Electronic is probably the only other Navi player I would consider. Over the last month, no player has been in the positive kill to death ratio other than Simple. But if we do look at the sample sizes, if we go with their whole group that they are playing with, the team that they have out there right now, they've played 74 maps together. Simple is a plus 527 kill differential. Electronic is a plus 128. Still with a 1.10 kill to death ratio, while the other three, Perfecto, Flamey, are all in the negative. So they're just not somebody that I'm really willing to target. And I think Electronic is discounted enough to consider here at 6,800. So I think if you're looking to stack somebody with Simple, I think Electronic is the one to do it with. That would be probably my only other Navi play I would even consider on tomorrow's slate. Ethan is just got roasted on Twitter by every CSGO DFS player. It felt like when they played C9. I think he had 2 points combined after the second map, and I think he maybe finished with less than 10. I'd have to look back. It was like 29 and 60, I think, was his kill to death ratio. So I think that is where a recency bias, you might turn that away. I mean, he's been fairly consistent, especially through Road to Rio, and he's been a consistent contributor for him. So I wouldn't take that one match too big into consideration. Rain's price finally came back to where it is reasonable. I think when he's getting close to 8,000, that is way above his talent level. even though he did play really well today. So at 6,600, I think Rain is also viable if you're going to stack with FaZe. If you want to stack Nico, Coldzera, and Rain, or Nico, Coldzera, and Brokey, I think that three-man stack for FaZe is nice. It is seeming like when you take a look at a lot of the GPP takedowns and just kind of optimal builds, it does seem like in those 3-game slates, the 3-2 build is really popular. 3 guys from your favorite stack, 2 guys from another stack, and then one off in the last game that you think might be an optimal play from there. Just like all the other esports, though, you are trying to figure out the winning teams are always likely going to be lending to better DFS performances. For besides a couple outrageous circumstances, it typically you're playing in a better game environment when your team gets the first 3 kills and there's only 2 guys left and there's 4 or 5 of you left. You have that man or 2 advantage. It's going to be easier even for the cheap guys to find a kill or pick up an assist in those times. Going to continue down here. The last couple dumpster dive value plays here. We got Bemis still at 4,400. I think I know he's not going to have the market share kills with Nico and Brokey and Coldzera, but I think as he gets more comfortable with them, and if they could sweep Fnatic, which I don't expect them to, he definitely would probably meet value. He's been okay. At 4,400, it's pretty hard to not pay off the price tag. He probably needs, if you're looking at, 8 to 10x, then at 4,400 he needs 40 to 40 points. Is going to be close to 10x. 44 points would be 10x. So I think Bemis is definitely viable. It's just if it goes wrong for FaZe like it did today in that first map, and then they almost lost the second map, he would have had 30 points. So I think and FaZe just got bailed out today with Mur kind of dropping from the server and winning that map, and then coming back and winning at Nuke. So from a GPP perspective, I think with Fnatic being priced up, I think they're going to be really low owned. And I think if you see how they played Train that last map against Godsent where they just ran them over, obviously I don't think that's something they'll be able to accomplish tomorrow against FaZe, but I do think it's definitely a leverage stack that you could go with. They are a little expensive, so you would maybe have to pair them with something cheaper like Gen G or EG, and then Fade, Simple, or Zywoo. But in those 3-2-1 builds, Simple is definitely one of those one-offs that you can use. If you stack 3 Evil Geniuses, you take Brokey and Coldzera, and then you one-off with Simple. Or Zywoo, if you feel that way about Zywoo, I would prefer Simple if you can get there. That's certainly viable, and I think definitely can be a really successful lineup build. From the GPP side, also, I think Gen G will have lower ownership, even though the prices are still pretty reasonable on the players. The funny thing is their prices are actually more expensive today, even though they were the favorite yesterday. Automatic up to 7,800, an awful game today. I expect him to bounce back. Kusta at 7,400. Played okay. Obviously, once they started getting beat down, it was kind of bad for everybody. And then Bentet down at 7,000. Again, not sure if I'm pronouncing that 100% correctly. Sean, when he was on here earlier with me today, he was able to kind of correct me on those pronunciations. So don't quiz me on that in the chat. JW for Fnatic is also a viable in the GPP Fnatic stacks. I wouldn't one-off with him or use him just as a standalone value play, because I do think he's pretty dependent on Fnatic being competitive against FaZe. So that's kind of my GPP and my cash targets tomorrow. Like I said, I would start with probably Simple or Nico, Breezy, Brokey, Coldzera, Cirque, Electronic, Bemis, Rain, and Ethan would be kind of my cash pool to kind of pick from. Again, if you are playing GPP, certainly be willing to leverage ownership against those stacks that will be popular using Gen G, maybe using Zywoo with Shox. Shox is kind of the only other play I really would consider for Vitality too. Vitality if you look, I look here in their last 113 maps that these guys have played together. ZywOo at a plus 564 kill to death ratio, while none of the other guys are positive at all. I think the closest here is Shocks at negative 84. And he had a couple good games there at the end of Road to Rio. But again, that market share of kills is really going to ZywOo, similar to Simple for Navi. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at for cash and GPP. If you have any questions, throw them in the channel. If you have never kind of heard my style of cash games, we'll likely try to get a video out on it, just kind of a how-to. But I primarily play head-to-head cash games where I am finding the 10 best of you or the 10 best players that I think are in the lobby, and updating my block list every slate, and then trying to fish for players that I think that I have an advantage in the head-to-head market, which obviously there's still a lot of variance in that can go up and down, but it's been a really profitable strategy for me over the last 2 or 3 years. So as I'd like to continue to get into the GPP pool a little bit, I think that's kind of where I'm at right now with heavier on cash. So if you guys have any questions, I'll kind of hang out here for another couple minutes, see if people have some questions. Otherwise, I would like to continue to come on live at night, even hopefully get those videos posted earlier. If you did not get a chance to check out Sean and I's discussion today, it did get a little bit more broad-based macro about CSGO and talking about map picks, and Sean's been doing a lot of diving into that. And I think, as I said on there, that's an aspect that I would love to continue to grow in that part, because I do think certain players, certain teams, if you can predict those map picks, it definitely can set and give you an edge over the rest of the field with a player that might perform a lot better in certain maps. Like someone like ZywOo playing at Overpass, where it's not as easy to use the AWP, you see probably a lower performance grade for him on a map like that. So yeah, let me shoot me some questions in the chat. Like I said, if you're kind of waiting around or looking for something else to check out Sean and I's stream from earlier. He's from Fantasy Alarm. He also works at the Fantasy Degens. I always am excited to get more people on to talk CSGO and just to really grow the sport. I think that is kind of our goal here, is to continue when these other sports come back, that we can see CSGO, Call of Duty, League of Legends, Rocket League, and all those other platforms continue to grow, because I know, as much as I love the other sports, having the availability to have a sweat during the day is awesome. And I know soccer does deliver that, but I think until that was back, we had nothing. So I think this is definitely another avenue for people to go. And even today, we found out that you can have something like an Anthony Davis type situation, that your best player is just gone when Murr drops from the server in a clutch situation in the second map, and then has to be subbed out for his coach for the remaining rounds of map 2, and then their bench player Dima comes in and basically gives it away in overtime. So that is a different aspect of CSGO or esports in general. I know I've had some rough situations with Rocket League. Some of you have probably played that slate where those EU master slates, where these games are getting postponed either after the slate locks or before the slate locks. So no, those things can definitely be frustrating and kind of turn you away from esports. But I do think like the CSGO and the League of Legends platforms do provide more stability that way. Obviously, playing online, most of these teams, we just do run a little bit more risks of some of these issues happening. When we'll play on LAN, then we will hopefully not have to worry about any of those things. So, and hopefully that comes back soon, because we do want to see teams that are struggling that would definitely benefit from being in those arenas and next to each other. I think that is definitely impacting some of those big teams. What is the multiple when you say meet value? I think one of the other guys that I kind of work with on this too. We've kind of debated this a lot. I at one point I said 8x, so 8 times the price, and then you also have to consider, um, player like Simple tomorrow. His raw projection is just going to be higher. So if I'm projecting Simple for like 80 points. And so at 10-2, that's about 8x. Now, if I go down to Bemis and he's at 4,400 and I say 8x, that's 32 points. I'd be pretty disappointed with that, for that price tag. So I think, that 8 to 10x, depending on the player, is probably reasonable. Probably 8x is still probably would be my answer to your question. But I do think when you get down to some of those values, I think you want that multiplier to be higher because their floor is a lot lower. So if Ethan puts up 10 points, he barely paid off 1x, so I think, those value plays, you definitely want to see a higher return. And a question that a lot of people have had about, playing value versus, a better player as an underdog, that is really dependent on the team sweeping. Bemis versus Some Die Young today and a similar price point. I think Some Die Young was a little bit more expensive, but, Some Die Young obviously outscored him fantasy wise, even though he was on the underdog. If Spirit would have just swept, it would have been even worse. Bemis actually had a good third map, but normally those super cheap plays, the longer the maps go, the wider the gap between, say, Bemis and Nico is going to be, because they just get more playing time essentially to allow their underlying skills and talent levels to, succeed, the inferior value play over time. So when you take those values, you really do want to see that 2-0 sweep. But it feels like we haven't seen very many 2-0 sweeps, especially with favorites lately. So, in esports, there's definitely variance, just like anything else. And I hope, if you didn't get a chance to watch this live, this will be up on our stream. Give us a like, give us a subscribe. Any shout outs on Twitter is always greatly appreciated. Uh, I'll see if there's any last questions. Zeekster69, thanks for hopping on, man, and showing the support, asking some questions. Hopefully we can continue to build this community and get some more people, active on here, checking out our Discord, fsidfs.com. Our esports Discord channel is free for right now. We have, Eddie Kruger, that's giving out Call of Duty core plays, League of Legends, Rocket League. I'm really focused on CSGO. One other thing I was going to touch on is the Showdown slate. So if you're still listening, don't hop off yet. The Showdown slate, Gen G and Evil Geniuses. If you pull up the pricing, and if you've been playing the Showdown slates, if you're playing cash, it's usually pretty chalky, So a lot of guys are just clicking the top 3 players, or if it's a big favorite, the top 3 players on the favorite, and then just filling in with the last one. Tomorrow's slate, Breezy is the most expensive, which that's kind of expected when you look at the classic slate and you bring it over to here. But Cirque, I think, is still really underpriced. So whether you want to go a 2-2 with Evil Geniuses and Gen G, or if you want to go to 3-1 with favoring, Evil Geniuses, that's fine as well. But I love Breeze and I love, Cirque as my 2 Evil Genius players. And then I think, in the middle there, Automatic has really been more of the consistent player. Today, obviously, was not the case. They all 3 weren't very good. But I do think, he is more expensive, so you might not be able to fit him if you want to fit both your EG guys in the captain spot. Just kind of depends on how your lineup builds. But definitely, if you're playing cash games, in Showdown, if you're willing to play cash in Showdown, then I think you just eat the chalk and try to find, let other people try to get cute and make the mistake. But if you're playing some GPPs, you can definitely leverage like a 3-1 Gen G stack, and use those top 3 Gen G players, and then just use Breeze or just use Cirque, and then hope to gain some leverage on the field that way. I do see, people multi-entering, just trying to use the different lineup combos, because when you're talking to Showdown with 4 guys, we're going to have Breeze be like 90% owned. The margin of difference between first, second, third, and fourth, besides the people that are chopping it, with the same lineup is pretty small. So it's a lot different than the classic slates where you're going to have a bigger discrepancy in your GPP scores. All right, I see we got 7 people on here. Awesome. If there's any other questions, shoot them my way right now before I sign off. Like I said, you can hit me up on Twitter, direct message, or on Discord if you have questions about your lineup. I appreciate the support. And if there's something that you guys like to see along with the other videos, we'll definitely look to schedule this more often. What is this, Ghost Rider? What is the secret for CSGO? I'm assuming in terms of DFS you're talking about, because if you asked me to actually play CSGO, I would lose. Give me like GoldenEye 007, and give me the short guy that it seems like a cheat code. DFS, awesome. So for DFS, are you more of a cash or GPP player? I guess I can talk to both, but from an optimal standpoint, I do. If you can take a stand on a team that you really feel confident in, I think stacking 2 to 3 players from that team is really important. So if you're doing a lineup construction, if you're doing like a 3-2-1 or 3-2, and then a one-off from one game, a lot of mistakes people are making are trying to think they can game stack too. And it can work in situations where you get matches that go to overtime and you get those extra rounds, but that's not something that we are predicting, just like you wouldn't predict overtime in NBA or any other sport. So really try not to negatively correlate players against each other. If you play 2 from one side and 1 from, 2, if you say you play 2 Navi and then you play ZywOo, in the end of the day, you're not really maximizing your potential there. So I think Ghost Rider, I think you need to find a team that you're going to be really confident in. Like tomorrow, you can be, tomorrow is a little bit tighter odds, so I don't know that any one team is going to be super chalky, but I do think a player like Simple can definitely anchor your lineup, him or Nico. And then looking at EG as a 3-man stack with Breeze, Cirque, and potentially Ethan. Ethan would be maybe the one I would leave off, because I actually don't mind stacking 3 phase tomorrow just because Coldzera and Brokey are so cheap. So I think if you really start... I always start with Vegas odds, yes, but then you also have to take into consideration recent form. If you're playing cash, most of the times you really want to stay on that favorite side unless you have a really, really strong take or feel on why somebody might get upset, or if the odds are close enough. Like we had some games today, like Gen G and 100 Thieves. I think most of the people are on Gen G today because the map pick favor was really in their favor, and then somebody banned a map. I don't remember exactly the details, and then the whole map projections went way off because somebody they would have played on a map that neither team had played on in like 3 months. I don't remember which one it was. I would have been map 3, but I definitely think you start with Vegas odds, yes, but then you really do want to look at those underlying stats. So just because Navi is -145 favorite does not make every one of their players in play tomorrow. That's why when you probably missed this, but I said Simple and Electronic are the only 2 Navi players that are positive kill to death ratio with this team playing together. Simple being that's like +500 or whatever. Electronic still with like a +180 kill to death ratio over that time. So I do think you have to go to hltv.org and look at some of those underlying stats. And if you've never been there or know how to look those things up, if you go to matches and you click on, so say if I click on, and I'll maybe show this a little bit more in tomorrow's video for the next slate. But if I go to a matchup and I click on FaZe and Fnatic, and then I go to Fnatic, I click on their team name up top, and then if you go to stats next, and then you scroll all the way down, and the stats is actually nice too because it gives you see their best map picks too, and that's where I think people are starting to try to predict map picks for teams and then how the performance will go. If you go down, you click all stats, and then there's this little button, above here, if you're under Fanatic, it's right under Brawlin's name. It says replace context with lineup. So if you click that, what it does is it takes the 5 players that are in the lineup right now, puts them up to the left side, and then when you click players now, after you have this context lineup in, it's going to show you that these 5 players these are the stats when these 5 players are together. So Brawlin at plus 360, Crims at plus 301, JW plus 100, Flusho plus 128, Golden minus 370. And this is an 157 sample size of these guys playing together. Now, I don't solely use this because I do think looking at 1 month, 3 month is definitely viable too. Okay, I have a mixture of 2-2 stacks, FaZe, Navi, and then one side of EG and Gen G. And I think that's great because I do think the ownership will be on EG. So if you want to leverage Gen G in a GPP model, I think that's great. And then maybe you upgrade your captain because the Gen G players are cheaper than the EG ones that you were going to take, like Breeze. So maybe if you're going with Kusta and Automatic, then you could upgrade, or even some at he's super cheap. I don't remember what his price tag is. You could definitely potentially use him too in a cheaper stack. So I think when you go to the underdog side of, say you take, like you're saying here, a two-man stack from an underdog, then I think that gives you the ability to upgrade to 2 stronger plays on the favorites that you're stacking, or upgrade your captain for more upside. Because I do think punting at captain for just value is better, maybe more suitable for cash. Again, if you're looking for that 2-0, but I don't really love punting completely at captain in an optimal build. If there's any other questions, I'm definitely willing to answer them. I appreciate the people who've been here and the support. So please continue to do that. I was able to hang out here for a half hour. That's exactly kind of what I wanted to do. Awesome, Ghost Rider. Feel free to reach out on Twitter or Discord if you have other questions. Hop on, see our video tomorrow. Come on live tomorrow. Hopefully we can get this done. All right, guys, I'm going to sign out. Have a good night.